afternoon and welcome back to Football League of World TV. We've got a debate show coming up for you this afternoon where Ben Wignall, my colleague, is going to be running through three players in the Championship that have surprised him this season. Ben, how are you getting on?
Yeah, all good, Alfie. Not really come down yet from the exciting events of Saturday afternoon at Deepdale in the last few minutes, but came down just enough to try and decide my three picks. It's actually quite hard. There was a few I ended up leaving on the scrap heap, but yeah, there's been quite a few players who've both good and bad surprised me this season.
We're streaming across Facebook, YouTube and Twitter this afternoon. So if you're joining us, please do get yourselves in the comments and let us know any players that have surprised you in the Championship this season, whether that's good or bad. Without further ado, we'll get straight into Ben's picks up next. So, Ben, your first pick was Jed Spencer on loan at Nottingham Forest from Middlesbrough. He's had a great season for the Reds. Do you want to just explain that selection for us?
Yeah, well, obviously he went to Forest on deadline day in the summer, didn't he? And it was quite surprising when there was Premier League clubs interested in the summer, but he's never really been an out-and-out starter at Middlesbrough. He's under Neil Warnock. He was playing at right back, sometimes at wing back, and then sometimes even further forward without really, nailing down a place in his starting lineup. And he made a few appearances at the start of the season, but for whatever reason, Warnock decided that he was going to let him go to a league rival. Obviously, Forest hadn't started the season very well, and they needed options at right wing back. And we always knew he had talent. He's shown it in spells in his early career, but he's really, nailed down that spot at Forest, and he's just been performing exceptionally well every time I've seen him on the TV, whether it's been in the Championship or in the FA Cup against Premier League teams. He's shown himself to be a very good Championship right back, and he can probably go on even further. Obviously, he's only got one goal and two assists, which for an attacking right wing back, maybe I'd expect him to have a few more, but he's been kind of proving with his just general all-round performances that it does seem it was a strange move for Middlesbrough to let him go to a league rival, and he's flourishing with Forest. And if they pip Middlesbrough to a playoff spot, if only one of them gets there, then it might end up looking like a bit of a silly piece of business from the summer from Borough.
Yeah, as you mentioned there, he's not been the most productive in terms of his goals and assists, just a goal and 2 assists in 27 appearances from right wing back. But I mean, Friday night was a perfect example of what he can offer going forward, winning the penalty that Brennan Johnson missed with a great piece of skill, turning Reece Norrington-Davies absolutely inside out. I think that one thing that impresses me about Spence is the relationship that he's built with Brennan Johnson. Johnson's slightly, playing slightly more central now, but he has played out wide on the right a lot of the season. Just a word on that partnership down the right for Forest. Spence really contributes to what Johnson's delivering in terms of goals and assists, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's a scary prospect probably for a fullback coming up against them two. They've both got, electric pace, trickery. I think it was the Arsenal game, the FA Cup, where they really showed it against, Nuno Tavares. They really tore him apart in that game. Like you said, Johnson's playing a bit more centrally now, and that probably gives Spence a bit more freedom, to get to, the byline and create these chances. It's probably a shame for Forest fans that combination probably won't be seen next season, because you can't imagine that even if Forest do go up through the playoffs, you don't think Spence will be there with the kind of interest that has been shown in him ahead of the summer transfer window. But I think for the last few months, Forest fans are going to really enjoy seeing that kind of tandem playing together.
Yeah, absolutely. As you sort of mentioned there, Spencer's been linked with a number of Premier League clubs, reported interest from Arsenal, Tottenham, Leeds, big clubs really when you think of Arsenal and Tottenham and how they're challenging in Europe. How far do you think Spence can go, Ben?
I think he's got a very high ceiling. I think obviously it's taken him a while to settle at one particular club. He's always been in and out of the team at Borough, but I think he's always had talent ever since Jonathan Woodgate gave him his debut when he was manager. I think he definitely can be a Premier League player. That jump up to a Tottenham or an Arsenal, it's a very steep one. Will he go there, and if he signs from jump into their first team straight away? I'm not so sure. He might need a bit of a settling in period if he does sign for one of those teams. But I think Middlesbrough with Isaiah Jones, who could have been on my pick of the three, because he's come in and performed really well for Borough. I think Borough themselves will be licking the lips at the prospect of a bidding war for Spence because he can easily get 8 figures from this summer. Sorry, I think so. Yeah, I think he can step into the Premier League, whether it's with one of those massive, European chasing teams remains to be seen. But definitely think he can do a job in the Premier League, and he's only going to improve because of his age.
Absolutely, he's had a great season so far, Spence, and with Forest pushing for the playoffs, he could have a telling say in whether Forest can get into the top 6 or not. Ben's next selection was Neeskens Cabana from Fulham, 9 goals and 6 assists in the Championship this season, by far his best return in English football. Ben, do you want to explain the Cabana selection for us?
Yeah, so he went on loan to Middlesbrough last season, didn't he, in the second half of the season, and he wasn't really getting in the team in the Premier League for Fulham, and that's kind of quite understandable. He's seemingly one of those players who's probably pretty good in the Championship, but when it comes to the top flight, maybe doesn't have that cutting edge on a consistent basis, being that team. But because of what he's kind of unproductive spell for Borough, I think he's showing flashes that he's a very good Championship player there. But I thought Marco Silva, may have been kind of aiming higher or bringing someone else. They've got Ivan Cavallero and Bobby Decordova-Reid who can play in that position. I didn't expect Cabana to have the impact he has now because of Mitrovic and Fabio Carvalho probably both taking the headlines this season for their impacts in the team. I think Cabana kind of goes under the radar, and 15 goal contributions in that Fulham team is probably on a similar level to Harry Wilson, who's a very highly rated attacking midfielder himself. So I think just because he's very underrated and goes under the radar, Cabana has definitely surprised me and a lot of others. He's been a mainstay in that team, and he's definitely proven to be one of the top Championship players this season.
Yeah, as you say, that's an interesting point that you make about one of these players that's brilliant in the Championship but doesn't quite cut it in the Premier League. Why do you think that is?
Not sure. He's quite a slight figure. He's not the most physically imposing, and maybe he's not just that consistent enough to cut it in the Premier League. Obviously, he can give the supply lines to the likes of Mitrovic, and I think a lot's been said of Mitrovic, and if he can cut it in the Premier League, I personally think he can. He scored 11 one season for Newcastle, but will he get them chances next season? I'm not sure. Fulham, they will probably have money to spend when they inevitably go up, and Marco Silva will probably be looking for that extra bit of proven Premier League quality. Cabana probably didn't get as many chances he would have liked in the Premier League under Scott Parker, and that's why I went on loan to Middlesbrough last season. So it will be interesting to see if Silva does actually, stick with him, gives him a chance at the start of next season. I think definitely on the best of the performances this season, he deserves that opportunity to try and prove himself one more time in the Premier League. But I think with the financial power Fulham will have getting back to the Premier League, it'll only be a short opportunity. If he doesn't take it, he might find himself out of the team quickly.
Yeah, I think you're well right in putting Cabana in here. I think after the underwhelming spell at Middlesbrough, what he's done this season for Fulham's been really, really impressive. Your final pick then, Ben, for a player that surprised you in the Championship this season is Alex Muller, and he's for different reasons to the other two. A free transfer from Barnsley. Do you just want to talk about Muller and why you've selected him in this debate?
Yeah, so he came into West Brom, didn't he, with Valeria and Ishmael. They'd both had, very good partnership at Barnsley, getting them into the playoffs. And Mowat was probably the kind of influence in the midfield that, got goals, assists, and he was the man that you look towards to, getting Barnsley through these games. And he started the season well at West Brom. He scored quite a few good goals. I think that one against Blackburn was a particularly sweet strike into the top corner. But as the months have gone on, I know he got a bit of an injury. But in the last few months, he's not exactly had the influence that West Brom fans would have kind of expected. He did get an assist against Hull actually this past week, so maybe he's gonna show a bit of good form for the last few months of the season. But I think West Brom fans probably expected more. I definitely expected him to be a more influential figure. He's definitely been in and out of games, and he's probably, people thought he was a top Championship player last season. He's just not had that kind of influence. Maybe it's because he's gone to a much bigger club in West Brom than he's been at, that he's not had that kind of impact. But he's definitely got time on his side in the last few months of the season to kind of prove that he's the player that West Brom fans expected to get in the summer.
Yeah, and I think that the change in management's not going to have done Moat many favours. Steve Bruce is managing him now. Ben, do you think that Bruce is somebody that can get the best out of Moat and get him back to those levels that we saw last season?
It could be, yeah. I think playing next to Jed Livermore's been very, he's been underperforming this season. That wouldn't have helped Mowat one bit, but I think with the creative presences they have in the team, like Grant, Robinson, he should be able to give them the kind of supply lines in if they're back in form. West Brom, they won at the weekend, snapping that winless run. I think you can definitely build around him. He's definitely got the kind of talent to do so in terms of, we saw goals and assists last season. He can provide them. It's just a case of whether he could, step into he was kind of like almost a big fish in a small pond at Barnsley, wasn't he? Whether he's come to West Brom and he's kind of on the same level as other players who have kind of played in the Premier League, have got more experience in him at that level. So I think he can definitely be a Bruce kind of player, but he kind of just needs to have a bit more influence in the game, get a bit more forward, probably take a few more shots. Because we know he can do it. He scored quite a few worldies for Barnsley last season. He did it earlier in the season for West Brom. So I think next season he could be, if he gets the right players around him, he could be a really, really big player for them.
Yeah, and I think one thing that we should maybe say about Moat is that earlier in his career, he's had these kind of setbacks before when he was Leeds' player of the season and then eventually, moved on from Ellen Road without really cracking it as other players from the academy moved past him, and he bounced back, tremendously at Barnsley and earned this move to West Brom. So fingers crossed he can bounce back and get back to his best levels. Finally, then we're just going to run through a couple of other people a couple of other players that we feel are worth a mention here. We're going to start with Lee Nichols, Huddersfield's goalkeeper, a free from Milton Keynes Dons in the summer, and he's kept 15 clean sheets in the Championship. I think for me, he's been a player that's really, really surprised me this season. I think Huddersfield in general have surprised me, but Nichols in particular, I didn't expect him to have the impact that he's had. Ben, do you agree?
Yeah, he didn't play much last season, did he? He was, kept out of the team by Andy Fisher. He was the keeper that Russell Martin wanted at MK Dons, playing out from the back. And it's kind of surprising seeing Nichols with not much Championship experience to his name go in there and be the first choice keeper at Huddersfield. And he's probably been helped by a pretty solid defence all season, but he's definitely had performances where he's kept Huddersfield, in games. And you've seen him more than me, Alfie, being on Huddersfield most weeks. He's definitely been a reliable figure in between the sticks for them.
Yeah, and I mean, there's quite a few Huddersfield players, given their surprising season, that we could name in this. Next up, we'll discuss a player that you'd just love to talk about, Ben Brereton Diaz, 20 goals this season for Blackburn. I think I sort of said off air to you, Ben, that it's maybe not that Brereton Diaz is playing well that surprised me, but I think the volume of his goals have surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, I think him being out and he's, he hasn't scored in 2022. He's had a few games before he did get that injury. I think him being out kind of accentuated Blackburn's kind of struggles at the minute. I don't know if that kind of scoring run earlier in the season was going to be sustainable, but getting 20 goals in the first half of the season is no mean feat. And I think he's always had that talent. Even when he broke through at Forest, we could see he had something about him. It took him a while to settle at Blackburn. But I think with Adam Armstrong out the way in the Premier League, he's kind of become the main man there. And, obviously we know the Chile call up in the summer kind of bred confidence for him. And Blackburn fans will be hoping he gets back from this ankle injury very quickly and starts delivering the goods for him, because, that kind of playoff race is heating up and they could end up slipping out of it if he doesn't come back and score the goals.
Yeah, going back to the top of the show, we discussed Jed Spence, the man on the other flank for Forest, Max Lohr on loan from Sheffield United. He was another one that struggled really with his parent club, but he's moved on loan to Forest and he's had a really good season, hasn't he, Ben? He's been really consistent.
He has, yeah, and he doesn't get the headlines because Spence, on the other side is the one that's the more flashy player who likes to make things happen, but Lohr's probably a bit more solid defensively. He's always had potential, coming from Derby. He's been in and around their first team for a while, but definitely proven to be a solid, addition to that kind of left wing back rank for Forest. And that's a position they probably struggled with for a few years. They've finally got a player now who's reliable, and it'd be a surprise if they don't make a permanent offer in the summer, because when he's been fit, he's been a regular, and they've had good form of him in the team.
And then another surprise package, really, of the season, Luton. They've been building nicely. A couple of their players, Harry Cornick and Cal Naismith, that we're going to discuss now, Ben.
Yeah, Cornick's an interesting one, because he only scored once last season, didn't he? And the season before he scored 9, so he's kind of been flip-flopping in between scoring and not having that confidence in front of goal. But he's, the way he took that goal against Chelsea in midweek in the FA Cup, he's clearly got confidence in front of goal a minute. And, along with Adebayo up front, he's probably been a big part of the success that Luton have been having. And Naismith's transformation from a winger at, the likes of Wigan and Portsmouth to becoming not only a left back, but now a left-sided centre-back at Luton's a very interesting one. And I think there's no surprise to see that the Championship club's interested in him this summer. Even though he's 30 years old, he's definitely performing to, a higher ability than we ever thought he could do as a defender. He complements the likes of Sonny Bradley really well. He's got the ball playing abilities as a defender that you'd expect being natural forward winger. So he's been an interesting one. One more player I would like to mention that I completely forgot about, and I'm not sure why I did. Emil Rees, 17 goals this season. He scored twice last season after his first season coming from Denmark for PNE, but don't think anyone expected him to get almost 20 goals this season. Hopefully he'll reach that. I think he's got 13 in the league, 4 in the cup, but I'm not sure why that one slipped my mind. But he's definitely probably been the one player that's gone from in the Championship that's gone from not really looking like scoring last season to almost prolific when he's been given the chance. So that's one I somehow forgot to mention, but should have been on my shortlist really.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you sent your notes over this morning, it was a surprise omission. I thought that he'd have been on there. He's having a great season, and maybe an outside chance of firing Preston into the playoffs there.
No, I'm too many games in hand for the other teams for no offence to get in there, I think. But that's probably a story for another show, maybe.
Yeah, definitely. All right, that concludes this afternoon's debate show. I hope you've enjoyed it and agree with Ben's selections. I think he's backed them up very strongly with his points. Thanks for joining me, Ben, and thanks for anybody that's joined us across Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Plenty coming up on Football League World TV over the course of the week, so make sure you tune in for that, and we'll see you again soon.